I was quite nervous about this, about as nervous as I give talks 6, 7, 8 times a week, and I was quite nervous about this, and I had to figure out what I was going to do, and folks who teach literary arts will tell you the best way to talk about something is to tell a story that's personal to you. So you're gonna hear some personal stuff today, and hopefully we'll see if a story emerges that is of any use to all of you. So we start with a question, and that question is, how? Yeah, all right? He's rocking those shorts. How does a young lad from Canada, drinking the national drink, actually really a religious drink, a religious libation in Canada, how does he get from there to here? And does anything useful happen on the way that will inform you or provide any valuable lessons? I have no idea. We'll find out. Another question, a similar time, are we here? There we go, is how that person got from there to here. That's some unknown rock club in Boston in 1989. I did my degree at Berklee College of Music back in the 80s. And by the way, I was told by Chris Robinson I have to start with a joke. Thank you, Chris. So my joke is this: how do you remove the bass player from your porch? And the answer is pay for the pizza. Ow. So we've got some challenges. We've got to sort of figure out, were there any lessons learned along the way? And is there anything useful that I can bring to you guys? And so I'm going to start with some of the stuff that matters, but I had to find a place for this photo. It has no relevance whatsoever to my talk. It's just weird, and I really like it. So, but let's move on. So I now teach a class for my Clarkson seminar on happiness, and I think happiness is the goal that all of us want. It's not anything else, it's happiness. We want human beings to be happy. And there's a lot of research on happiness. There's something called the happiness plateau, which means that basically if you get to a point in your life where you've got a job and income and food on your table and a roof over your head, then at that point in time, your income stops mattering at all. And so if we want to be happy, then we can say, well, of course, all of you guys are going to go out there and make good money as Clarkson graduates, sure. But at some point, it's not going to matter that much. Whether you're making $100,000 or $1 million or $60,000, it's not going to matter. And so the question is, what else can you do to be happy? One answer is to drink beer, but if you do too much of that, you stop being happy. So just a little, you can become very unhappy with too much beer. So careful there. And this is one of the things that matters. This is a shot from the Dominican Republic, riding horses with my family and my family from France on the beach. And it turns out that all the happiness research tells us this is what you want to do. You want to experience connection with the people that are important to you. You want to provide to a broader network around you, to a community. This is what matters. Our family, perhaps, and our broader community around the globe. So that's what I'm going to try to focus on today. Now, to get to this kind of happiness, oftentimes, and to connect with the globe and to connect with our communities, oftentimes means taking risks. And so I'm going to move here, it's a little sunlight there, to an old Jewish word, chutzpah. Which means audacity or nerve. And basically what that means is you need to take some risks. And I took a few, some not so well thought out along the way, but others that turned out to be incredibly useful in the weird path that I took along. And in Boston, by the way, taking risks looks like this. So now apologies, of course, to my Yankees friends in the audience, but I am from Boston, so. That was for you, Vince. So the first issue is trying to make sense and understand the world out there. So most of you who are about to pick up a graduation degree from Tony on Saturday are at around 21, 22 years old, and the world right now is your apple. It is your place to go. And I did a little bit of that, and it turned out to be incredibly informational. What you want to do is ride elephants. Or the equivalent metaphor. This is a trip I took back in 1989 to Asia, to Thailand, and then also to Nepal. And it changed my life. It changed everything that I think about the world. It changed what I eat. I still eat meat, but I eat a lot less of it. And I learned more about the world during this experience than almost any other time since. That's my friend Will, and that's our guide Lipo, and that's a stilt village in the northern area of Thailand, near Chiang Mai. The other thing that you want to do while you're getting to know and understand people from the world around you is to change your perspective. And I recommend doing that while staying as regular as possible. And by that, I am alluding to laxatives, the use of laxatives. This is the outpost on the edge of the earth. This is in the Manang Valley at 12,000 feet in the Annapurna Himalayas in Nepal. And where they've just had a terrible earthquake, and the entire country right now is just reeling. And this was on a trek, a circle trek through the Annapurna Himalayas, and it was at this point that I had dysentery and very, very bad stomach problems, and that is where you go to the bathroom. What you can't see there is that is actually on the side of a cliff that drops straight down 500 feet. And when you went to the bathroom and did your business, you could look through the hole and look straight down 500 feet. It was a very interesting method for handling sewage. And of course, this experience was made even more powerful by the lack of electricity and the lack of batteries for my flashlight, and the fact that I had to go to the washroom every hour on the hour and had to crawl out to that little hut so that I didn't walk off the side of the cliff. So those experiences where you change your perspective, where you change your understanding of the world, right, even if it's through a toilet seat dropping down a cliff, those are the experiences that stay with you, and they stick with you the whole time. The other thing that I found is taking part in some humbling experiences can be a useful thing to do. Those experiences where you're awed, where you're a little bit scared. And so, like we just mentioned, on Saturday, you're going to get a bunch of degrees. And I did that too, back in '89. And 6 days later, I was in the front of this ship with an amplifier and a bass and a suitcase. And I got on it, and about 600 people worked on that ship from 42 nationalities. People from Korea, Pakistan, Jamaica. The Jamaicans were awesome. All the Jamaicans were the bartenders. They were good people to know. Italians. The Italians were crazy. And I learned more about nationalities and about understanding and viewing the world on that particular 6-month contract than I did. This was prior to going to Asia. It was also a humbling experience in terms of work experience as well, because I looked like this. That's not me, that is another show band from the Galileo, but I wore a tuxedo every night, 7 nights a week, playing in a crappy show band, doing really trite, terrible Broadway music. Apologies to anybody who loves Broadway music, sorry. And that was a humbling experience. It taught me the value of sort of sticking through sometimes a kind of what felt like at the time a menial job, right? A challenging job, and gave me a different perspective on the career that I had chosen. I also was humbled by this experience. This is a classic Boston cab, and all through college I supported myself by driving cab. I'd have gigs sometimes, and then occasionally I'd pick up a couple of cab shifts. And I also learned about people There is no better experience than putting 40 random people into a car with you for 20 minutes at a time every day, and trying to suddenly get a sense of how different, how varied people really are, right? Coming from all over the world into Boston Airport. And one of the things that this really encapsulated for me is the value of good people. Because one of the things you don't want to do is have this person in your cab. And this actually happened 2 weeks in. I had a 12-inch buck knife at my throat. It was a bad time, crack epidemic in Boston. And the value of good people, of surrounding yourself with people who are valuable and useful and who will work with you is critical. As many of you know, I'm an advisor to the Outing Club. I'm a climber. And the one thing in life that you don't want to do is climb with Gollum. This is a bad experience. It will only lead to a burning ring of fire or Mordor or falling. You don't want to do this. Instead, what you want to do is you want to surround yourself with people that will work with you to create a better thing. People like this. These are some of my colleagues who I work with on the REU program in the summers. You'll see Professor Twiss and Professor Powers, and Andrea Farrow and Michelle Crimmy and Shane, a whole bunch of Dick Parch, a whole bunch of folks in there. Those are the people. I've come here. That is a crowd, and students, of course. Some of those students I'm still in touch with now. They touch you and they stay with you a longer time than you will ever think. I have proof of this because this goes all the way back to 1985. And the guy on the far left is my friend Jeff Lilly. That is, by the way, 30 years ago. You should be able to be doing some math here. And the pretty young thing in the middle, I met in 1985. I went to Wellesley College, and I was from Berkeley, which is an almost all male, like 90% male music university. So we went to Wellesley College to pick up chicks. Sorry, I'm sexist, but that's the way we termed it back in those days. And I met her, and she's actually way in the back. And I'm still married to her today. That's Mary Cabral. And I'm the luckiest guy in the world. So, and this is my friend Tim, who I played in 6 bands with in Boston, and I still see Tim every year in northern Vermont. He's been a friend for over 30 years, and Will in the center I'm still in touch with. These are people that stay with you, those good people. Surround yourself with them. Your life will be made from it. So, now I'm going to get serious for just a little bit, and I'm calling this section of the talk The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And it's got all 3 things, and it's not a spaghetti western starring Clint Eastwood by Sergio Leone. But let me talk a little bit about the world for a second. And the world has some good news, some really good news. Infant mortality in the world has been dropping like a stone for over 50 years. Life expectancy has been increasing for over 50 years. Air quality dropping in most of the developed world. Not the same story in the developing world, but we expect better things in the future. Literacy rates going up in every part of the world, exponentially. Democracy increasing across all areas. Child labor dropping. Poverty dropping. And war dropping. These are long-term trends. This is the world that you are moving into. We want those trends to continue, and we will have challenges doing it. But this is good news. We don't hear the good news about the world we live in. But all of this good news has been made possible by the work of many, many people. And that is the world you're now going into. That's your world. The question is whether you'll make this good news continue to happen. But we also have 2 other challenges in life, right? These are the bad and the ugly. And I'm going to talk about the bad first. The bad is loss. And these are 4 big losses. These are personal losses. None of you will know these names. Kit McDonald was an 8-year-old. He was a friend of mine in elementary school, and he ran across the street and he was hit by a city bus going to get candy from the convenience store. I've never forgotten him. Kathleen Dempsey, was a friend of Mary's and mine, and she was stabbed 17 times and murdered by a burglar in Arlington, Massachusetts, back in the early 90s. And it took 20 years for them to find her murderer. They did, finally. Costa Exarchilakis was also a close family friend, got married, had a kid. His kid was 3 years old. He woke up one morning, he made a couple of comments to his wife, he went back to sleep, and he never woke up again at the age of 36. He had a congenital heart defect that no one knew about. Frank Cabral was my father-in-law, who passed about 2 years back. And these people, they stay with us, and every one of you has loss. We all have loss. My loss is not unique, right? So the challenge is, how do we face our loss, right? What is the process by which we understand this? Hold that thought. The other challenge is a different kind of loss, the loss of people we don't know. This is Marty Richards. Marty Richards lived about 10 blocks from me in Boston, in Dorchester. And the irony of this sign is that he's one of the 3 people who was blown up during the Boston Marathon bombing, and kind of ripped Dorchester apart. And obviously the irony of this sign, right, which was taken about 8 months before he was killed, is extremely painful. And so these are powerful losses that we have to think about and compare and address in our lives. We also have the ugly, and the ugly is the other thing that we have to face. The ugly, I've chosen 3 things to focus on. One is inequality. This is data that students in my American politics class see. Right now, by every measure, in most countries in the world, we are seeing income polarization increase, inequality increase. The bottom 80% of Americans right now have seen a stagnation of their wages and income, while the upper 20% and really the upper 1% have had an immense gain in wealth. And this is not just unique to the United States. This is not the American dream. And so we have an opportunity right now to face this question, and our political system right now is not addressing this problem. Secondly, we have a long, slow, intractable emergency. It's the worst kind of problem. It's global in nature. The literature calls this wicked problems. This is climate change, and it's going to be slowly, invisibly, and not so obviously all the time affecting all of your lives, right? There's a reason that hundreds of thousands of migrants are trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea into Europe from North Africa. It's because North Africa is becoming a very unpleasant place to be. So these causes are not direct, and they're enormously challenging. We have to find political solutions for this. We're not close yet. And last, we are moving towards a world right now in which governments, not just the United States, Canada, Britain, France, China, are able to institute a system in which they can watch their citizens more carefully than ever before, ostensibly for security, to save us from terrorism. How many people, how many Americans has terrorism killed in the United States? And I'm thinking of Marty Richards right here. It's not that many. It's in 4,000, 5,000. We lose 40,000 people a year to smoking in the United States, right? So our challenge is in creating a security state that if the wrong government is in power, a government that decides not to obey the ethics and the dictates of democracy, that decides to push the envelope, they have a tool in their hands that can be used to great damage. And it's up to us not to be sheep. And it's up to your generation not to be sheep. You must pay attention. So, We want a system, democracy. The democratic literature tells us that the people are in charge, the political system answers to the people, and interests and businesses are constrained by the political system. Unfortunately, more often than not, we're seeing a reverse, where small interests and businesses are oftentimes constraining the political system, which is then looking to a constrained sheep people. What do we do about this? That's the challenge, right? And so the answer is, how do we address loss? How do we address the political encumbrances that we face? And how do we keep the good news coming? And there is good news. So this is the response. This is the question. And the cynical response is, hey man, pigs fly. Yeah, nothing changes. The government is always corrupt. There's nothing you can do. And I categorically refuse that notion. This idea that we are not capable of change. One of my lessons in this is by this guy. This is Howard Zinn. Sorry, my pointer doesn't work on the screen. He's being bundled in a police van. This is in the early 1970s during a protest against the Vietnam War. The American people stopped the Vietnam War. The American people instituted the Civil Rights Act. The American people passed a wave of environmental laws that completely changed the nature of this country that we live in. And the American people are capable of many more changes. Don't fool yourself that nothing can change. Everything can change. In 1995, if anyone had told me America can elect a black president, I would have said, you are insane, you're doing a lot of crack cocaine. Right? That was an impossibility, right? And we have challenges, but we have made changes. The other thing that keeps us going is work. You have to work to do this. So I've put up a climbing picture. This is my friend Gavin, and you need good partners to do it with. I'm coming back to that thing about people, right? You're not going to climb a mountain by yourself, or if you are, there's a good chance you might die. There's going to be people around you, a network that you need to help you make that happen. Hard work is hard. And I always recommend making your friend go first. And the other thing I recommend is getting a knight to help. Critically important. And oftentimes it involves a whole bunch of people working together. That's the way change occurs. It's real, it happens, it's there, it's hard work. The other thing that we respond to loss with is with beauty. This is Picasso's Mother and Child from his Blue period. It's one of my favorite paintings in the world. I got to hang it about 15 times, and I was smart enough not to drop it. I'm very happy about that, keep my job, when I was working at Harvard's art museums. And having art in your life, beauty in your life, whatever beauty is for you, is critically important. So for me, it's been paintings like this. For me, it's about music. I like Radiohead a lot. I like a lot of the bands that Kevin was talking about. I love Schubert, even though he was called Little Mushroom. Billie Holiday. And some of us even have bad taste in some of our art. This was a particular favorite of mine when I was age 11. But whatever it is, you need to have that beauty, that art in your life. That's a way to respond to our loss, to our challenges. It energizes us. And you also need to make art, however you do it. I do it by playing the bass. I got to come back here and reinvigorate a musical life that I had stopped. I didn't think it would ever come back. I stopped playing bass around 2001. I was busy. I had a kid, a house, a wife. I was climbing some, I had a job. And I came back and started playing with Bill Vitek and other musicians in the area, and it's reinvigorated me. It doesn't matter what you do, take up knitting. I think we heard from Floyd about the knit cap. It doesn't matter what you do, but doing something creative, artistic like that is going to invigorate your life in ways that you will not see perhaps until later. Education. I started my master's at the age of 34. I started my PhD at 38. It's not a conventional path at all. Don't be afraid to keep learning. And in this case, just be aware that the tradition of having an insane Scotsman with a dress, blowing into a screeching pig bladder is not something unique to Clarkson. Harvard does it too. So I'm right behind Dean Schneegel there, getting my master's degree. Family, obviously, whoever your family is, it might not even be your family. You all have your family. This is key, it's core, it's critical. There's my boy. I love him more than anything in the world. My folks, and my other family, and Frank, who passed away 2 years ago. And one of the things is you will be surprised by your family. I had a couple of parents who were really unhappy people together for much of my early part of my life, and they separated literally the year that Mary and I got married. And then 2 years later, they got back together, and they are two of the happiest people I have ever met in my life. That is after 40 years, much of that kind of unhappy. It is a miracle. So crazy stuff can happen. Possibility exists. Possibility that you never saw coming can happen. You gotta dance. You gotta get goofy with your friends. These are some of my ice climbing buddies. And of course, you must eat poutine. Anybody who's ever taken one of my classes knows that this is God's food right here, only if correctly prepared, double fried in peanut oil. If Steve Yagardis were here, he'd be nodding his head in agreement. Cheese curd, not cheese, and of course, highly commercial gravy with enough sodium to knock out a rhino. That's pretty much it. And the other thing that you need is a place. This is Fairfield Pond in northern Vermont. It's the place that I go when I need a recharge, to think about challenging political constraints, to think about loss, to keep the good things going. And every one of you needs to have a place in your life that you can go to recharge that way. So I like to think that possibility exists and that hope and beauty exist. And after all, right, here you are with a crazy Canadian musician who's sitting on a stage giving you a last lecture. I can't imagine a bigger change or possibility than that. Thank you very much.